So, what have we got in essence? It's not rocket science. Lower taxes, cuts illegal migration. So, first up, what is the state of play? Why does Keir Starmer need to do anything? So here is the current polling. This is from YouGov from a couple of days ago. Reform 27, Labour on 23, Cons further down 17, Lib Dem further down from that. It's pretty good news for Nigel Farage. His party Reform are currently in the lead, projected to win the most seats if there were a general election taking place tomorrow. So why are Reform in the lead? Well, because everyone is broke, aren't we? Why are we broke? Because the tax burden is set to reach its highest ever level in terms of how much we pay out of our pay packets that goes in some form of tax versus how much we're then left with to not really afford, disposable income or buy little treats or improve our situation. Everything is expensive. So let's talk about why taxes are so high at the moment. Well, there's a couple of reasons, really. Chiefly, I always say, it's because UK debt has spiked quite significantly. You can see just up here, debt interest payments, £116 billion a year now. Like, these figures are from last year, but if you look at the projected figures for where we're going to end up at towards the end of this decade, like, we are on course to spend more on just servicing our debt than we will be on education, on actually educating our kids. We're just going to be paying off just the interest on the credit card payment. Basically, that's how dire things are. So then you think, okay, well, 116 billion a year just going on debt. Maybe there's some growth. Maybe the UK economy is growing. And so even though we have to pay that figure out on debt, gradually as we make more and more money, we can afford to pay down the debt a bit more, and then maybe we'll be better off. Because you got to remember, right, it's not rocket science, is it? Trump has told Starmer, if you want to beat Farage, if you want to beat populism, although quite why Donald Trump would want us to beat populism is a mystery in itself. But he's like, if you want to beat Farage, you got to cut taxes, right? And it's not rocket science. It's simple. So we should be able to cut them. So then we get down to growth in a post-Brexit UK. You can see here that investment has completely flatlined, if not dipped a little bit. It's a direct result of us leaving the European Union. Then you get into GDP growth, which you can also see has just remained pretty much flat. So you've got 100 billion-ish on debt interest payments. You've lost 100 billion through Brexit. Nothing else is growing. So then you think, okay, well, maybe we could raise taxes. Maybe we could raise the taxes to get some money, and then that pays off the debt, or at least a chunk of it, and then maybe afterwards we could lower the taxes a little bit. Maybe? But then if you look at, where taxes are currently at, the whole reason that we're talking about this is because the tax burden is so high. And if you did add another penny or 10p onto income tax or national insurance or VAT, the fear there by economists is that you will gradually impoverish people to such an extent that they actually won't be in a position to spend any money in the wider economy, and the whole economy itself will just implode. So then you think, okay, well, things are tough. Things are hard. But at least they won't get any harder. Maybe we could just sort of coast along. We won't raise taxes. We won't make people worse off. But at the same time, we'll just keep things as they are. And then at least we can hold up, at the next general election, we can hold up a placard that says, vote Labour again. At least things didn't get any worse. But no, because we have what is referred to as an aging population, because people are living longer, and they need more medical care, they need more spaces in care homes, more GP appointments, more prescriptions, and because at the same time as they're getting older and they go on to the state pension, then actually they're starting to cost the exchequer an astronomical amount of money. And that's why you end up with graphs like this, charts like this from the OBR, from the Institute of Fiscal Studies and such like, where they say, state pensions are predicted to double in cost in the next couple of decades. So, what is a way that you could offset that? If pensions and pensioners are going to cost us a huge amount and taxes are already high and we don't have growth and we can't borrow anymore, how could you fill that? I know you could get immigrants in, couldn't you? Which is exactly what the IMF have said we desperately need to do. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, they produced this annual report for advanced economies, and they've said if you want to get yourself out of the danger zone with regard to a declining birth rate and the lack of tax income that you're then going to get versus the aging population who are going to cost you more and more and more money, realistically, the only way that you can do that is by not putting these weird, frenzied curbs on immigration. You should basically let a lot of immigrants in. So, are you still with me? Here, we can't borrow more, we can't increase taxes, we haven't got the growth. The IMF are saying, yeah, you should let migrants in. Actually, you do kind of need them. And why are we doing that? Because the tax burden is already super, super high. We want it to come down, give everyone a tax cut so they feel better off, so we can get reforms lead down and Labour can stay in power and we all have a much, much nicer life. But here is the thing, guys, is Trump is on the front page of most of the right-wing rags today saying if you want to beat Farage, here's what you could do, is you got to curb migration, stop the immigrants coming in, and you got to cut taxes. And it's interesting that he's saying that because that is basically Nigel Farage and the Reform Party's shop front, isn't it? That's their things. You know, if you think of Nigel Farage, Richard Tice and Neanderthal, what do you think of in terms of policies? You think of drastically lowering immigration numbers and these fanciful promises to radically cut your taxes. That's what I think of anyway. And so here we have reforms commitments, reforms policies. Nigel Farage, net zero immigration, literally no immigrants overlapping the number of people who are leaving. Net zero immigration may not be enough, but it's a start, he says. I mean, I don't know quite what that is alluding to. You know, net zero immigration might not be enough. Like, he's going to start rounding up people, is he? Deporting them off to El Salvador. Like I've said it before and I'll say it again. If welcoming people into the UK is such a problem for you, just make it easy for me to leave. Because honestly, they just bring them in. They can have my GP appointments, my kids' places in the schools. I don't care. Just ship me off to Koh Tao with a pina colada. I'm gone. So net zero immigration, Farage and Tice's £80 billion of tax cuts revealed. 80 billion. And then policy number 3, reform would scrap asylum, DEI and net zero if elected, says Farage. And bear in mind, you know, don't lose the context as we're talking about this, right? Trump is telling Starmer it's easy to beat Farage. All you have to do is cut taxes and lower immigration figures. It ain't rocket science. Cut taxes and ruinous immigration, says convicted fraudster Donald Trump. Because then, presumably, you would be robbing the policy portfolio from this Nigel Farage character, right? Cutting immigration, giving everyone a tax cut. But let's talk about these policies. Nigel Farage's £7 billion in DEI savings don't actually exist. What a total shock. Well, maybe they do. Maybe they're just hiding in the same place as the £350 million a week for the NHS. UK spends record $5 billion on asylum, with bills up over 30%, which sounds like a sort of bad news story, doesn't it? Like it's a record $5 billion. But the reason I've put that there is because $5 billion in the grand scheme of things, when we're talking about $116 billion going on debt interest payments every year, when we're talking about a lost $100 billion every year on Brexit, when we're talking about Farage and Tice's $80 billion of tax cuts, I mean, it just doesn't add up. Oh, we'll shut down asylum and we'll save $5 billion. You're not going to be able to pay for £80 billion worth of tax cuts if you just close down asylum. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. Like maybe maths is woke now. Same thing with net zero. You know, he makes it out like net zero is costing the UK exchequer, you know, £100 billion a year. That's how we're going to pay for all of this stuff, like nationalising steel, giving everyone a massive tax cut, get rid of the 2-child benefit cap. Like, you're not... I'm sorry, even if the $7 billion DEI savings did exist, 7 plus $5 billion shutting down asylum and the net zero, if they close down all of the net zero initiatives, that's only $4 billion. Like, all of those together add up to, like, what is it, like 15, 16 billion? Like, how the fuck are you paying for £80 billion worth of tax cuts with £16 billion in savings that are already actually very fucking ambitious? And that's why, if we slide across, we've got the reactions from the financial community, from the economists community. Listen to this. This is from Simon French. He writes for The Times, actually, and he works at Panmure Liberum. He's chief economist there. French said he thought there was also a gap of about 70 to 80 billion between Reform's savings target and the practicalities of realising savings on any reasonable timescale. He says if Reform came into power and implemented their plan, he said the financial markets would conclude that the government would inevitably have to issue more debt, which would cause the UK's cost of borrowing to rise along with mortgage rates while the value of the pound plummeted. He says the scale of the market reaction could be up to twice the size of what followed Truss's infamous mini-budget. Truss tried to introduce something of the order of 30 to 40 billion worth of uncosted commitments. This is about twice as significant in terms of the gap, so you would expect the market reaction to be more violent. But again, guys, it ain't rocket science, is it? You've just got to cut taxes and ruinous immigration. But it's like you can't. You can't cut immigration. You need immigration, guys. You need immigration or growth or horrendous borrowing or like... In fact, you know what? I've got the solutions here for you. Are you ready? This is how you fix the UK economy. Let's do it. So here we go. We're going to slide over. Let's go up. The first one, socialise childcare and fix the housing crisis. Because if you get a load of people suddenly having babies, you could probably borrow on the back of that. You can say, well, look, the population has been dwindling, but we are expecting an awful, like 1 million more babies or 2 million more babies, and those babies will grow up and earn money, and that money will be taxed in the future. So although we are absolutely broke as fuck now, actually, future-wise, the outlook isn't that bleak. But you'll never get a growing indigenous, native British population unless you fix the housing crisis. The next one down, ramp up immigration to plug the gap. This one is self-explanatory, just like the IMF are credibly saying if you don't have immigrants to come in and plug the skills shortage to work and earn money that is taxed and then funds the aging population with the extra money and funding and services that they need, if you don't have that, you are fucked. You're either going to be borrowing horrendous amounts of money or just sitting back praying for growth, which actually seems to be where we are now. Next option, speaking of praying for growth, we could rejoin the single market, couldn't we, guys? We could get growth that way. Estimates have put the possible uptick to the UK economy at between 3 and 4% growth to GDP, which would then give us the income that we need to, in theory, give everyone a tax cut. You know, make everybody's lives that little bit easier. Maybe you could do that if you joined the single market. And then finally, the final option that we have here is to jack up taxes and slash the fuck out of everything, which is, I mean, I know that we said like praying for growth was the approach that we're taking at the moment. It's sort of a blend of praying for growth while jacking up taxes and slashing all of the public services. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that when we see front pages like those of the Daily Telegraph, the Express, the Mail today, where they retail out the thoughts of President Trump, and indeed of their own economics editors or political editors or whatever, when they suggest that the problem is actually, oh, it's all very simple. It's so simple, guys. I don't know. I always like to look at it like, to an idiot, it seems simple. But basically, like, if we're talking about either Farage winning or Keir Starmer having to adopt Faragean policies in order to beat him, whoever the conversation about the economy and how to fix it is being had with, they need to look at a chart or a graphic like this, and they need to be able to explain, how are you going to cut taxes? Where is that money coming from? And if you aren't bringing in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of immigrants to plug the skill shortage, to service the aging population, to bring the national debt down, to secure tax cuts that everybody says that they want, if you're not doing all of that, then what's your fucking plan?